Gene, I want to start with you. I have a good friend named Justin who is a big fan of the graphic novel, and he had a question that he had to get out. But he said, how do you personally feel about the changes from the source material to the show, as it obviously took some liberties from the comic? How do you personally feel about the changes that were made?
I do think of it as an adjacent adaptation rather than a direct adaptation. And I think that's a good thing. We were taking a story that was in a 200-page graphic novel, moving it into a television series that had at least 8 episodes. So in the graphic novel, even though it has 3 storylines, I think you could argue that there's one beginning, middle, and end. But because there's 8 episodes, you need at least 8 beginnings, middles, and ends, right? So that's one big change. The second one is that we were moving the story from vaguely the 80s and 90s, which was when I was growing up, to the 2020s, which is now. And the conversation about Asian America has changed between then and now. So my hope is that people will do both. People will read the book and also watch the show, and that the differences between the two and the similarities will actually cause this conversation about what's changed about Asian America from then until now.
With the Monkey King, I mean, it's a story that I started reading since I was like maybe 3 or 5 years old. You know, we have the child version, we have the adult version, we have all kinds of version. And when it comes to seeing the Goddess of Mercy descending into a high school in America, it just blew my mind. Just go, whoa, wow, this is incredible. I love how it's being married together, that the present day and the mythology married together. It was just something I've never seen before.
I always gravitated more towards Asian stuff. Although I did also watch, Marvel stuff, and I read comic books and stuff like that as a kid too. So all of that was really important. So to be able to meld that all together in one project like this was awesome, right? Like I could bring stuff from my own culture, but also introduce, this awesome iconic character to a larger Disney audience is like an amazing opportunity here. So there was a lot of weight on it, but at the same time it was really exciting, and I was really excited to be able to take on that challenge and present this character to a new audience.
Sydney, for you, this show obviously has an amazing cast, and we're seeing like the buzz around it. You guys got to go to the White House and meet the president. I mean, it's taken you to some pretty crazy places, but I was wondering, what were your kind of takeaways being in this cast, working with a show that has to do so much with culture, like a different culture?
It's not necessarily spoon-fed to people that didn't have the Asian American experience growing up, but it's definitely not attacking or making you feel uneducated or stupid or anything like that. You really feel like you're watching these real people, and it doesn't feel like the show is trying to teach you any lessons or trying to instill anything in you, but it just naturally happens, which I think is really rare to find in such wonderful writing.
And if you are Asian American, you'll relate to it. And if you aren't Asian American, you'll still relate to it. And at the same time, you sort of get sort of like a little glimpse, right, into a world, and learn something about people, how different people grow up. And I think that's a really wonderful thing.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time outside of work, actually, pouring through the scripts and really kind of discussing all the nuances and the ins and outs of this, particularly two characters. We turned everything inside out, really, when we were preparing for this role.
The casting, it was perfect. And immediately all 3 of us fell into the exact chemistry that we needed. Especially when we first met, because I didn't know Chin Han that well. And when you first get to know him, he can almost be a little bit intimidating, because he doesn't talk a lot. He's and I was like, I grew up with a single mom. So I'm like, I wonder what it's like to have a dad. And then I get on set and I sit down with Chin Han. I'm like, hi, Chin Han. He goes, mm. I'm like, oh, oh, is this what it's like to have a dad? Where you're just like this guy in your house and you're like, I wonder if he likes me.
Melvin, I want to move on to you. You take a look at your IMDb, man, and you are an advocate for the AAPI community. I love to see it. And you get a great cast like this, right, with all these superstars and then these newcomers that are just absolutely hilarious. I want to talk about expanding, right? There's obviously a setup for another season here. Who are some of the Asian talent or from the diaspora that you would love to introduce into this universe?
The whole idea of this thing, as we started putting it together, was like, can we, figure out the Asian American All-Star game, right? Like, it starts from like Michelle, the key to everybody, and then we, we're lucky enough to have Jimmy O Yang, and Ronnie Chang is a good friend of mine. Like, we just started adding people like Stephanie Shu, and I knock on wood, if we get to a second season, I'd like to continue that, right? Like, if you're able to start you got to keep going. If it's like the NBA, you got to get Michael Jordan. You've got to keep going. There's all-stars and Hall of Famers everywhere, and you got to just bring them in.
Fate is not decided up there, but down here.
So freaking unbelievable.
Everything is more connected than you think.